To show and apply layer styles, let's use the PSD or Photoshop file layer down here, but it also works on pretty much all type of layers. I already applied a gradient overlay to the layer, but if we right click layer styles, it will show you that style and 8 different other ones. So possibly show all styles directly. Though it's worth noting that it would actually reset all the previous styles you may have added to the layer inside of Photoshop. So we're going back to default. Or you might want to use remove all to take all layer styles away. And let's undo it, Control or Command Z. And now if I enter the layer options, there's a new drop down for each layer style, plus a shared blending alternative in the top. And this is how all styles will look like with the basic settings. But let's start with just the drop shadow. In the very top, we got all the blending modes that we gone through already before. But underneath the drop shadow, the background color is the same, hence we can't actually see it. So press the black box and choose a color of your liking. Perhaps either something more realistic, or you can even spice it up with something more, well, perhaps a neon looking shadow effect. So use the color picker and just press anywhere on the screen if you want to apply the same color here. Let's first drag the distance up a bit so we're actually seeing the shadow. Then a choice for opacity or normal transparency. Use the global light, which is connected to the blending options in the top, but I will come back to this one very soon. Adjusting the angle of the shadow, rotating it in any type of direction, and as we just saw, the distance moves the shadow away from the main text. The spread will make the edges connected to the sides a bit less gradually transparent and a bit more rough. So the size function, together with the spread, are used to increase or make the shadow larger, while the spread is working with the alpha or opacity for visibility smoothness. The noise can be increased up to 100% and will create this pixelated, bit noisy look, a bit similar to analog film grains, but perhaps a little bit more eye-catching, if you will. Final one in this list is the layer knocks out drop shadow. And this was one I really couldn't get my head around, doing no difference whatsoever, even when changing the layer opacity or doing any type of pre-coms, since the shadow's opacity is connected and the actual transform effect is not responding. But actually quite obvious when you see it. So just head over to the blending options, advanced blending, and first option there will lower only the fill opacity. So separated from the actual shadows, as it can become a problem when you want shadows with higher opacity or less transparency than the actual fill and don't want it to shine through, and this alternative can really solve that problem. Let's continue with the layer style, inner shadow, then come back to the rest of the blending options later. I will go for normal with blend mode, and all stuff for alternatives down to choke is the same here on inner as the drop shadow. The choke work pretty much the same as spread, both as it function with the alpha, where a low choke gives more gradient or smoother color changes of the shadow, while a higher number gives these very strong, distinct edges, and it also functions in relation to the size option. Then again some noise in the end. And a good use for shadows is to add a little bit of depth and importance to objects or text, whatever you want to highlight. Visually, separate elements or objects from backgrounds. You can highlight the edges, or perhaps you want to draw attention to something, focus the attention, outer glow. A few new things like the choices to change the color type as single color or gradient. The first we might change in here by picking a color, while the second alternative, gradient, possibly adding and adjusting it inside the edit gradient. With the gradient smoothness, there's quite small changes. changing the technique between softer and precise is a bit more visually obvious. The range option functions most as a dependent for how much range either of the color in the gradient should have more or less of. While for the single color type, it becomes more of a contrast to the spread, more sharp and ranging further when low and more soft and transparent the higher the percentage. Then lastly, the jitter, which is only for the gradients, and it varies its colors and opacity depending on how much you increase it, almost a bit similar like noise. We get the inner glow, and it works pretty much the same, but glow inwards instead of outwards, and same options down to source. A setting that changes the look quite dramatically when moving the glow from the edge to the center. Spread is instead replaced with choke, just like with the inner shadow before. Though, by changing the color type here, from single color to gradient, we're not just getting the edge glow and will instead affect the whole fill or inside color space. Both glows are really great for enhancing the visibility, or if you want something to pop out a little bit extra from the background, separating an object a little bit better, and perhaps also a bit more interesting look, giving a little bit that visual spice if you like. The bevel and emboss, it have 5 different styles to choose from: the current, inner bevel, outer bevel, emboss, pillow emboss, and the 5th one, stroke emboss. However, last one will only work if you actually have a stroke, so let's turn that on quickly to see the difference. Technique here got a few different alternatives. Smooth options, chisel, hard, and chisel soft, concerning the shadows and highlight to differ the perception of 3D look or depth a bit differently. Depth can be lowered to 1% or raised all the way up to 1000%. Direction from up to down. And a handful of options, similar to before. And just like the shadows, it's controllable in group with the global light. Then there's a separate adjustment to change the blending modes between both the highlights and the shadows, plus individual opacity. This layer style, you can use it, for example, to just get a bit of quick perception of 3D without actually going into 3D. Next is satin, and may be used to give that slight metallic look to a text or an object. All options we've seen before, except for the last, invert, and this one will just push the satin style the other way around. Color overlay is quite an obvious one where a color is overlaid or painted on top of a text or a shape, but can also be blended together with the underlying color or colors using blend mode again. Gradient overlay, the main one here, as we've seen before with the 2 glows, edit gradient, which gives you this alternative. Some additional details here, like choosing the 2 colors to gradually change between from left to right and vice versa. Just press the underlying arrows to change them and see and adjust their location anywhere from 0 to 100%. Or change the midtones to a bit more against the left color or a little bit more to the right color. For the top arrows or markers, change the opacity for each color and also the transparency of midtones in the center. You will also be able to add as many new markers as you like for both the coloring and the opacity. As you might already know by now, change the colors both here in the middle and with a color scale to the right, directly on the color attributes. Or use the eyedropper or color picker. Or even write in the color hex code directly. The options down to style is the same as before, but letting us change from linear, radial, angle, reflected to diamond. Use reverse to change the color order. Align with layer will focus the gradient to the actual layer. And if I was to turn it off, the gradient coloring will spread to the whole composition, which is seen when moving the text layer around a bit. Finally, the offset, used to quickly change the amount of gradient between the two colors. And overall, I think gradients is just a really nice type of layer styles that give that little bit of that extra flavor or spice to your shapes, footage, objects, backgrounds, whatever you can imagine. The last layer styles, stroke, not that much to say about this one, but it creates this extra line of color around the text or object. Then all options we've seen before except for the position. So choose from outside, inside, and lastly center for slight differences. Now with them all visible, we have this pretty crazy look, which of course can be better adjusted further for stylized precision, but according to your own preferences. Now just a few quick things about the blending options in the top. With the blending options, it's possible to control all the layers that have the use global light at the same time, which are drop shadow, inner shadow, and bevel and emboss. And unfortunately though, for the latter, when we turn it on, we lose a bit of that, or almost all, shadow and brightness, that 3D perception. Anyway, the light, angle, and altitude may be tweaked or adjusted here for them all. Then, as you've seen before, there is an advanced blending with the fill opacity. Plus, there's a separate control for the RGB, or red, green, and blue. With the blend interior styles as group, interior representing all layer styles as inner glow and shadow, bevel and emboss, etc. And all these styles will use the main blending mode of the layer out here, while not affected by changes if turned off. The last one, use blend ranges from source, specifically for your Photoshop or PSD files. Whenever you want to use the blend ranges and you have the advanced blending options set to in Photoshop, switch this one on to get the blending in After Effects to respond a little bit better to the source color types.